Hey, it's Wacko Bob here, and whoa, how did it go from light to dark here almost instantly? Let's see if we can fix that a little bit here and get this taken care of here. That's a little bit better. I guess, should we be able to run with it? Let's see if we could change this around here a little bit here. See if we could get me where you could see me a little better. Okay, that's much better here. I do want to bring up some stuff because I've been really bringing some things up, and there was someone who, when I talked about Calvary Chapel, they had brought up their comments. Unfortunately, those comments are now gone for some reason or another. But she did do some videos herself, and I really want to bring this up to her, and see what her thoughts are too, because I liked her opinions and and her thoughts on it. Really, we were on the same page, and I want to just talk about this to another sense from another area, and this has to do more with what is going on here with not just Calvary Chapel but other churches, and my thoughts on it. And this one, I could be wrong. I don't have any real facts. I do want to make that point known there too, so people can understand where I'm going to come from with this. This has to do more with what's going on here. With not just Calvary Chapel, but Harvest Fellowship, and the things going on there. What we're seeing guys like Brian Broderson do. As opposed to what Chuck Smith would have done if he were still around, and what Paul Smith was trying to keep going. This has a lot to do with that, and for me. The same thing has to be said. What's Greg Laurie doing these days? I went to Calvary Chapel, Fort Lauderdale for the longest time. I think the direction there has changed. I am looking into a lot of it myself right now, and I'll probably have a bigger update where that goes. I'm hoping that the mega church, that one of the few Calvary Chapel mega churches, really does make it and really does get back on track to what it was meant to be. And I just do want to mention that. I also go to a place called Harvest Church, which is right here by where I live. I'm hoping it's not a part of the Harvest Church Fellowship, or Harvest Fellowship rather, and not being a part of that whole thing. Because before I really come down on Calvary Chapel, I've turned more on Greg Laurie and what he was doing and what Greg Laurie started to do before I even before I even realized what was going on with the Calvary Chapel movement. And what I'm hearing now about not just Calvary Chapel, but other churches introducing yoga and introducing that whole thing, seeing what's happening there. A lot of people are subscribing to what, basically the whole Rick Warren, I'll call it like it is. Brother Ken might actually love me for this one. The whole Rick Warren fraud. And I gotta say, I'm really starting to worry in these last days. Do I have sinned I have to worry about? Yes. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. All of us. Doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter who you are. And yes, that includes you too, Brother Ken, but we're not here to talk about you. We're really living in the last days, and I'm worrying about where Calvary Chapels are going and what they're doing, and how really, as non-denominational as Calvary likes to make themselves, as Harvest would like to make themselves, it seems like they're being very, 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 very denominational now. Whether it's creating their own little doctrine or whatnot, it just seems like it's going that way to a lot of ways. Not all of them are. Not all of them are. I'm very happy with how I get to hear Doug Sauter give his message. I'm very happy about all that. I'm happy to see some of the things that do go on, with what I've seen since only going back and checking out Calvary Chapel for about the last 2 months. But I gotta say that for me, there's a lot of questions still being left unanswered with it all. And especially to her, I'm not remembering her name right now. I do apologize to you, but what is it that's really making everything look more like, for lack of a better word, the emerging church? The emerging church, or Unitarian, as some people would like to refer to it as. What's happening with all this? To see yoga going on, to see, and that's just one of them, to see some of the things going on that you would not normally see at a church. Are we trying to be too purpose-driven to where we want to be so people-friendly? I mean, there's got to be a certain point to where you're not going to take the world's concept so much. I mean, the closest I've seen a Christian go to the concept of the world is whenever it comes down to election day. Really. I mean, do we have our things we get into? Absolutely. Absolutely. And how do I agree with it with the church? And I'm not trying to direct this to Calvary Chapel or Harvest Fellowship. Just telling you, because there are a lot more that are doing it, and it's really getting to the point where we are in the last days, and we do have to worry about being tested. And I have a cat that ran by me here. But it's just what it is. And I'm going to be honest here. I really think about what goes on with churches, because it took me a while to really get myself to go back and check out what Calvary Chapel Fort Lauderdale is doing now. Since Bob Coy's resignation and things are under Doug Sauter now, with what, even Doug Sauter got rid of the politics, even of the people that moved him up to lead pastor, to where I think he is more or less the senior pastor of that particular church. Same thing. But he even got rid of that, so he was getting rid of a lot of what the fat was that really was not needed. And I worry about this because, and how churches are going to react and how they're going to be. Now, I will say this, and this just has to do with churches, period. This isn't, and this has to do with more than just yoga and what we're seeing happen with the emerging church and what other churches are really starting to bring in as far as the movement goes. There's only one movement which we're supposed to worry about. And that is the movement of salvation in Jesus. That's the only thing I ever want to be concerned about. But does it really happen with compromise? These are some of the things I really worry about. And I want to go back into... I'm going back a lot of years here, just so people can understand where I'm coming from. I'm going to go back to 1990. When I was all of 16 years old, and I was one of those really studying, really getting into it, attached to a church that really started to change up. And in the end, as much as they loved my involvement, they expected more out of nowhere. And they expected more, and they expected more. And they didn't just do this to me. They did this to almost everybody. Some people were manipulated to this. But this didn't have to do with bringing in yoga. It had to do with keeping things boxed in a church. Now, I'm all for not keeping a church in four walls and having it boxed in. Jesus didn't do that. Jesus went out and witnessed to all the world. To hear about spiritual yoga and some of the other things that go into it, I don't think Jesus would do yoga. I don't think he would. I'm just being honest. I tried to think of things and how the whole phenomenon that went on for a while with Christians, WWJD, what would Jesus do? I just don't think he would do that, because Jesus, would he go into a bar to witness to someone? Absolutely. But he's not going to drink. He's not going to drink with them. He's not going to get himself drunk. He's not going to get himself loaded. Drinking is a sin. Having hard liquor, alcohol is a sin. And this is a man who knew no sin. He'd be there to deliver people, and that's what we're supposed to do. but trying to be more church friendly. And I've seen a lot of churches like this. I've even seen, I forget which church it was. A lot of people want to say that this was a Calvary Chapel, and he might be right. I have to talk to him again. Where a church was literally held in a bar where the senior pastor was also a bartender. This shows you the craziness that I'm talking about with what's going on with church, and within the church body. And I don't mean specific churches. I should say ministries. But it shows you where it's coming from. Here, and what they're doing to try to be more people friendly. But you're going too far with it, in my opinion. There are certain things you don't do. I argued with a lot of people. I argued with this church I was just telling you about, because in the end they were starting their school. They were starting. They were starting to need to get more money, and they got to the point to where they were doing an offering, a tithe, and an offering where they do their tithing, and then do their and then they would do their little campaign they had going on where you'd offer more money. It got to the point to where it was once a month, then it was once every few weeks, and now it gets to the point where it's once a week now. At that time where they were doing it, because they'd gotten themselves a bigger church, and they got them, and then everything became about numbers, and you weren't going to be able to do this unless you did this. And you were coming here religiously 3 times a week, and it was just, it was just getting ridiculous. And I even, years down the road, when I worked security at a gate, so one of the assistant pastors showed up there that's supposed to be head out of the Good Samaritans, and a resident refused to let them in. I'm trying to leave church names out. I use the bigger ones to really understand a point there. But this is from a totally opposite direction. This is where you're trying to be too holy, and you're trying to keep everyone boxed in, the Christians. And you can't do that. Church might as well just be for the Christians only, and no unsaved salvations will go in. It's kind of like what happened when all you'd have are ambulance of medics go out to pick up somebody, where back in the day you could find roving doctors that would take care of sick people. That's how Jesus would do it. But that's what it became there. And it became more and more, and it got to the point to where the tithes and offerings, and I'm trying to get to this point because I don't have that much time, where they would have a third offering where they were just begging for money after that, and they would pass the bucket around again, saying, "We need your money, we need your help, we're in debt, we've never been in debt in our lives," and because they had to have things now, they're waiting for their timing and not God's timing. Now, to get to the point about the school, they had a woman who was very, very loyal there. Who was very, very loyal. She went there with her kids and whatnot. And she had her kids going to a private Christian school that wasn't their church. And they were telling her how she needed to. And she ultimately did leave this church, but they tried this one last attempt by going to her house. And I used to go to this church. This church was more interdenominational than non-denominational. And interdenominational is really what a lot of these churches that claim to be non-denominational are really doing today. But long story short, she didn't want him to come in. And she told me afterwards, that they were trying to push her around into doing things with her kids. And she said, "No, I'm not taking my kids out of the school. The academics are great there. My kids are doing great." And they tried telling her, as long as you're going to come to this church like this, your kids will go to our school. Now, who are they to say that? Who are they to say that? Who are they to bark out orders like that? Like that's how they are as an authoritative figure, as a pastor in that church. I don't believe in a pastor's authority over anybody, with the exception of really being under a teaching, and that's it. That's the way I've always believed. I might be wrong. But, there's certain times, should you consult with a pastor with what you're doing? Yes. But you also got to look out to what that pastor might do. And a lot of people learn that. I could get into stories about that. But long story short, I was working a gatehouse, like I said. They didn't want this person in, and they knew ahead of time they were going to try to come in. I took care of the matter, and I talked to them, and they were talking to me because they were trying to hustle their way in. I got into a debated argument with them because I wasn't going to let them in. I had to do my job, number one. Number two, I told them because I told them I used to go there, and I said, I'm like, I'm hearing this, and this is the first time I heard something like this. Why don't you show me the scriptures where you guys are going to money grub off of people? Because in the end, it was all about numbers. I said, I left after I wouldn't become a number for you guys. And after everything I did with your ministries and with your church. This gets good. So he was trying to show me stuff. I said again, and he kept showing me scriptures. He loved to show things in Haggai about money for the church and whatnot. And I said, this has nothing to do with that. That's just talking about giving of what you earn, which is normally your tithe of 10%, which most people believe. I believe we give as the Lord directs. That's my feeling on it. But that's another story. And they went, and they went about trying to tell me this. I said, there's nothing giving you the authority to tell someone they can't, that they can't go to your church and not go to your school. There's nothing that's saying they have to go to your schools. You got nothing, and you have no right under both the law, both biblical law and the law of the land, to tell them what they can or can't do. There's nothing telling you can do that. I said, truthfully, Jesus does not want things to be in a church. I said, you had no right telling him that, and I got all over him, and he didn't like it. And he ultimately did turn around and leave because I wasn't going to let him in. I didn't have traffic coming at that time. The gatehouse I was doing security at. So I let him know it. I said, you do not have the authority or the right. I said, and truthfully, I would have your church investigated. I would have the IRS investigating your church to see what you guys are doing, to see if you guys shouldn't even have your tax exemption withdrawn. Because what you're doing is wrong. I said, you had no right. You showed me no biblical proof. You got this doctrine, this false doctrine going on that I'm not going to. I said, you can't buy me into it. You can't try and resell me. And I went to your church way back when my mother was going there. And there I was standing there, 23 years old at the time. This was literally 20 years ago. I'm 43 now. So I told him, I said, you had no right. I said, and the fact that you and your church are coming here takes a lot of nerve. And I said, you need to beg for his forgiveness. This church since then has moved from the city, and they moved to a different city that was more of a money city. A city where the people have money, and that was about. It was about this. It was about numbers. And if you ever know, there's still those churches out there that are like some of the TV evangelists that all they're doing is they worry more about prosperity, and really in the end it's about their prosperity. But that's what I'm talking about with the churches today. You still got churches like that do that. That's 180 degrees the other way, as opposed to what we're seeing here with Calvary Chapel. That seems like it's going more, that's going more on more of a purpose agenda than them. A lot of the Calvary Chapels and Harvest Fellowships. And this is something I worry about. I don't go to Calvary Chapel regularly. It's not my home church. I've been to the satellite location that's here in Boca. And of course I've been to Fort Lauderdale. The atmosphere I think is nicer over there in Boca. But I still raise questions. I even talked to the Boca pastor about it. The Boca pastor and I really haven't talked as much. I think because I asked the questions, maybe it is. We'll soon find out. I am going to go and talk to them over in Fort Lauderdale where a lot of this goes, and I want to talk to one of the pastors. Not worried about Doug Sauter. I think Calvary Chapel, Fort Lauderdale has improved a lot with how they're handling things. I'm glad they got a better control over things with the people that go there. They've stopped a lot of things that were going on there that ultimately blind eyes were being turned to, and I could get into those stories. But this isn't about Calvary Chapel. This isn't even about the church I told you about. This isn't about anything, you know. All I know is we got to look out, because a lot of people are endorsing the whole Rick Warren fraud, as some people would call it, including you, Brother Ken, so we're on the same page there. But I think people know where I'm coming from with this now. Anyways, I want to thank everybody. You know, if you don't think I'm making sense, go ahead and write your comments. You know I was a little more all over the place, but I just had to get this one out there. And please, let me know your thoughts, too, on what's happening. And give it to me, whether you love me or you hate me. Hopefully it's all love. Thanks.